boys and girls, welcome to my channel. I'm For Classic and welcome to BenchART. So for today what I do have in it is Yakuza 4 Remastered, a game developed by Nvida GT Studio and ported over to the PC thanks to the Keylock, which is a software house that ports mostly games to the PC and a lot of Japanese titles. They usually do a good job, so yeah, that's pretty much about it. So this game it is using the in-house engine from Nvida GT Studio that was used in other previous Yakuza games. So essentially it is using the same engine as the Yakuza 3, and also it performs very similar to Yakuza 3, although there are some nice additions to the graphics. Alright, so the settings that I will be using throughout this game will be exactly the same, the ones that I did use for Yakuza 3. So essentially it is a custom settings where I did put the textures on high texture filtering at 4 times. I do use shadow and LUT quality at minimum possible, and I'm using FXAA as anti-aliasing. So for the minimum requirements, and I have to agree, they do require 4 gigs of RAM, an i5 from the 3000 generation, and the GTS 450 with 1 gigabyte of VRAM. And so this is a performance that I got without recording at 720p. So low settings did provide me a performance above 30 frames per second with an average of 40. My custom settings, the settings that I'm using for this video, I had an experience above 30 frames per second, alright, with an average of 32-34 frames, alright, so it was stable. And for median settings, unfortunately, most of the time and pretty much all the time it was below 30 frames per second. So Yakuza 4, since it is using the same engine and it was remastered and bundled up in the same package, what I have to say is that it behaves the same way as Yakuza 3 in frame rate style. So the frame rate, this game doesn't support frame skipping, which means that when you are going to the options menu, you need to select 30 frames per second or 60. I know that this might be a little bit confusing for you guys, but for example, there was a guy that did reply me in some video, I don't know which one it was, but he said something like, no, you can lock any frame rate that you want with MSI Afterburner or Nvidia control panel. But I know that you can lock any game to any frame rate that you desire. The issue is the game logic, it is tied to the frame rate that you select in the options menu. So for example, you do select 30 frames per second inside this game, but you have 25 frames per second. You just decide to lock the game at 25 frames per second with MS Afterburner or with Nvidia control panel. It doesn't matter. You put it inside the game that you want 30, but you have 25 frames per second. What will happen is your game will start to run in slow motion. So the same can be said about, let's just pretend that you can have 40 frames per second, and you decide to lock the game at 40 frames per second using MS Afterburner or using Nvidia control panel. So you lock the game at 40 frames per second and you decide to select the in-game frame rate at 30. So what really happens is the game will lock your frame rate at 30 frames per second, but it will run at full speed. Although if you decide to lock the game at 40 frames per second, but you inside the game you select 60, since you are not reaching 60 and you are reaching 40, what will happen is the game will run at slow motion. So for you guys to get this straight, what you need to do is to select the frame rate that you know that you achieve always. That's your target. So your objective it is to have above 30 frames per second all the time or above 60. And since the GT 740M or the GT 920M doesn't achieve 60 frames per second, you can only achieve a frame rate above 30. My recommendation it is to lock the game at 30 frames per second. So just like I did with Yakuza 3, I haven't tested Yakuza 5 yet, but if I had to guess, the behavior it will be the same. Alright, this game doesn't support frame skipping and you need to select your target frame rate inside the options menu of the game, and if you don't achieve that frame rate, Whatever if it is for 2 frames, 1 frame, it doesn't matter. The game will start to run at slow motion. Alright, that's the thing. So comparing to Yakuza 3, I think the game runs pretty much the same. I just think this first environment, it is slightly more demanding than Yakuza 3. It is a little bit different. For example, Yakuza 3 presents you with tons of NPCs on screen, and Yakuza 4 decided to ditch most of those NPCs on this first level, for example, and they decide to trade it off with screen space reflections all over the place, which you can't turn it off because there is no graphical options for that, but it looks really great and performs more or less the same. It might be slightly worse, alright, in the performance side, but since you are locked to 30 frames per second, you don't even notice any difference to Yakuza 3. Alright, so well, now let's talk a little bit about the game, shall we? So I don't have too much to say. I just played a little bit of Yakuza 3 and played a little bit of Yakuza 4, and I just needed to read a little bit around the internet, and the too long didn't read thing is that this is essentially more of the same. Alright, it's just like Yakuza 3 with some revamps into the game, so combat now feels more smoother and less clunky. It's still, there are a lot of attacks that are just pretty much the same thing and same animations as Yakuza 3, but it feels more responsive, more smoother, less clunky. So it's an improvement, you see, over Yakuza 3, and it's also a different story, which is a good thing. And also, for the first time, I think, on Yakuza series, Yakuza 4 introduced different playable characters. So you just started with this guy, and then later into the game you get access to your main character from Yakuza 3. So, and there are some switches according to some reviews that I've been seeing, that the characters just switch back and forth. So it's a different story overall, and a small improvement over Yakuza 3. And that's expected, since Yakuza 3 initially it was released in 2009, and Yakuza 4 was released 1 year later in 2010. So they just add 1 year to improve, and obviously they didn't really improve that much compared to Yakuza 3, but still the improvements were nicely enough, and the new story, it is fine. So if you wanted to add more than Yakuza 3 to play, you can now go with Yakuza 4. So I will say the same thing as I said before from Yakuza 3, which is this game costs 20 euros on Steam, which is exactly the same price as Yakuza 3 and the same price as Yakuza 5. Although, if you buy all the bundles together, I mean the Yakuza Remastered collection, which includes Yakuza 3, 4 and 5, at the time of this video it should cost you about 40 euros. So it's like pay for 2 games and take the free games. That's about it. Alright, so I think it's a nice deal if you want to complete all the Yakuzas. And if you think that 20 euros it is expensive and you are not really sure if you will like Yakuza, you can also try Xbox Game Pass, which costs 10 euros per month. But if you never tried Xbox Game Pass, you just pay 1 euro and you get access to a ton load of games, and the Yakuza Remastered collection is there. So you can try the game, and if you like, you can also complete the other games and continue to be subscribed to Xbox Game Pass, or just buy the games at another place, use Steam or any other store that you want. So guys, I think that's all that I want to talk about Yakuza 4 Remastered. Hope you keep enjoying the rest of the gameplay, and I do hope to see you soon. Goodbye.
スカイファイナンスって店やってる金貸しだ。この喧嘩、俺が勝手にやってるだけのこと。あんたたちがムカついてから絡んだだけだ。組織がどうこうは関係ねえ。てめえ、なめた口聞きやがって。いいね。気合入ってきたみたいじゃないか。久々に本気の喧嘩が楽しめそうだ。ムカつく野郎で。いいだろう。その分かりやすい挑発乗ってやるぜ。こっちはいつでもいいぜ。行くぞこんがきゃー。行くぞ。
申し訳ありません。もしもし。ええ、そうですね。
もしもし。
あ、
あ、
じゃ、早くそれよ
い
でも
で
とに
だけん
笑い
あ
なんか
わ新井さん。
秋山さん、あんたがくれようとしていたチャンス、どうやら俺はもらい損ねたようだ。それじゃ。
新井さん。
ああ、頭を一撃、余分な発砲は一切なし。こりゃあ殺す気満々で撃ってるね。逃げなくていいんですか？
え？
犯人はさっき走ってった男ですよね。このままだとあなたが警察に捕まることになると思うんですが。
あんた。
仇の方ですよね、あなた。
ああ、そうだな。
警察ってのは嫌なやつが多いとこです。捕まったら無理やり自白させられてしまうかもしれませんよ。
花ちゃん。
あ、ちょっと手遅れでしたね。
お前動くな！動くな！俺？動くなと言ってるだろ！いや、おい、違うって。いや、俺じゃないんだって。無駄な抵抗はやめろ。
杉内さんの尋問は半端ないと思いますんで、気合い入れて頑張ってください。それじゃ。
暴れるな、お前。動くな。
杉内ってあの？おい、ちょっと待てよ、あんた。いや、だから違うんだって。さっきのとこに聞いてよ。ねえ。
社長